crowd without truly being part of it. Mark and I looked at each other in shock. It made no sense. He didn't belong there, and something in both of us recognized that immediately. We watched him move down the street until the crowd thinned out. When it did, we saw him clearly, still shambling, still moving at that same unnatural pace, disappearing into a darker side street until he turned a corner. We were quiet, not panicking, but deeply unsettled. The same man in the same suit appearing multiple times in different parts of the city, always shambling, always out of place. Both of us knew something was wrong. Later that night, we returned to the house. Mark went upstairs to his room, and I went downstairs to sleep. I shut the blinds and tried to settle in. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up to a tap on the window. I froze. After a few moments, I forced myself to look. I lifted the blinds slightly and looked down the alley. At the far end, I saw the back of a man turning the corner. It was him again. He moved out of sight, but right before he disappeared, he looked back toward the window. I told Mark the next morning. I explained what I saw, and even he admitted that the entire experience was disturbing. He doesn't believe in anything paranormal, and he's extremely logical and grounded, but even he was shaken. As for me, I'm more spiritually sensitive, and this experience stayed with me. And I also know it's with Mark months later. I'll never forget that weekend. The man in the suit felt real and unreal at the same time. Something about all of it was off. I drove home to Florida on July 6th, and the image of him turning that corner has stayed with me ever since. I never thought I would be the kind of person who double-checks door locks or memorizes the sounds of my own floorboards. But that changed after 1 week last winter. I live alone in a small house I bought a few years ago, and my routine has been boring and predictable. I work from home, order groceries, go to the gym late at night, and I don't talk to my neighbors much at all. That routine is why it took me longer than it should have to realize something was wrong. It started with a noise I heard around 2:30 in the morning on Tuesday. I was half asleep on the couch with the TV still on low, and I heard what sounded like a soft thump near the back of the house. It wasn't loud enough to scare me, and my first thought was that something had fallen in the kitchen, or maybe the house had shifted. We all hear sounds like that in the house or apartment once in a while, right? I muted the TV so I could listen. Nothing else happened. I checked the back door, made sure it was locked, and went to bed. The next morning, I noticed the back door felt different when I opened it. The deadbolt still worked, but the handle felt loose, like it had been twisted too hard. I made a mental note to fix it later. That night, I went to the gym around 11 p.m. like I usually do. Side note, I like an empty gym. I got back around midnight to 12:30. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed my porch light was off, yet I hadn't turned it on. I stood there in my car for a few seconds, trying to remember if I had turned it off earlier, and I convinced myself I probably did. Inside, everything looked normal. I walked through every room, just doing an innocent little analysis before going to bed, something I had never done before. On Thursday morning, I woke up to my alarm and noticed my phone was at 12% battery. I always charge it overnight, and I clearly remembered plugging it in. The cable was still connected to my phone, but the charger was no longer connected to the outlet. Weird. I told myself I must have knocked it loose in my sleep, but that explanation didn't really make sense because my phone was still on the nightstand, not in bed with me. At that moment, my only explanation was I picked up my phone in the middle of the night, accidentally yanked it off the outlet without realizing, and set it back down. I started paying closer attention after that. That night, I stayed up later than usual, sitting in the dark with the TV off, just listening. Around 3 in the morning, I heard slow thumps coming from the back of the house. Footsteps? I asked myself. Nah, it can't be. I held my breath, but the thumps seemingly stopped. After a while, I convinced myself the thumps came from outside. I'm in the suburbs. There's of course other people around, even at night. The next day, I found muddy shoe prints on the floor near the back door. The thing is, though, the footprints weren't clear. Like, I couldn't distinctly make out patterns of the bottoms of the shoes, which made it look like someone tried to wipe them off before walking around. My stomach literally skipped a beat. I stood there staring at them, trying to understand how they got there. I hadn't had anyone over. I hadn't gone outside in muddy shoes. I checked the back door again, and this time I noticed faint scratch marks around the lock, like someone had used something thin to pry at it. I called the locksmith and told him I thought my lock was failing. I didn't...
For 100 years, Cheyenne Mountain Zoo has been here, where generations gather and a love of wildlife begins. And the legacy continues with our groundbreaking International Center for the Care and Conservation of Giraffe. Open this summer. Plan your visit and be a part of what's next. Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, a mountain of memories. Visit cmzoo.org for more details. In partnership with Children's Hospital Colorado and your Colorado Springs Toyota dealers.
A quieter neighborhood. And even closer to work. With great schools. And we got a way better rate than we expected. Plus, separate bedrooms.
Get a mortgage that adds up. Wings Credit Union. Let's figure it out together. Equal housing opportunity. NMLS number 405466. Insured by NCUA.
If your service light's on, trust the techs with the train. 270 hours with zero complaining. They train under the hood, they train down in the pit. 270 hours means their training is legit. It's the smart choice for smart folk who care for their steed. So trust the instant oil change that starts with Valvoline. Valvoline Instant Oil Change. Change wisely.
Say anything about the footprints. He replaced the lock that afternoon and told me everything should be fine. That night, I pushed a chair under the back door handle and slept with my bedroom door locked, something I never did before then. I woke up just before 4 in the morning to the sound of something tapping lightly on my bedroom door. It wasn't a knock. It sounded like someone testing the door with their fingertips. I stayed completely still, staring at the door, my eyes burning because I refused to blink. The tapping stopped after a minute, and then I heard soft footsteps moving away. I didn't sleep after that. In the morning, the chair was still under the back door, but the back door itself was unlocked. The new lock wasn't damaged, it had just been turned, and that's when reality truly set in. I wasn't just imagining these things like I thought I was because I was tired. Someone had been inside my house while I was asleep and knew how to unlock the door from the inside. I called the police and tried to explain without sounding insane. They checked the house, looked around the yard, and told me there was no sign of forced entry. But yeah, that was kind of obvious given that I changed the lock. They suggested I might have unlocked the door myself without remembering. I knew that wasn't true, but there was nothing they could do either way. That night, I stayed awake with all the lights on and a kitchen knife on the table in front of me. Around 2 in the morning, I heard something from down in the basement. The basement door, which was just outside of the kitchen, was cracked open. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. I stared down the hallway to the cracked open basement door. I walked over to it, peeked down through just what the crack in the door would allow me to see. And I swear, it was not my imagination. I saw either at the bottom of the stairs, or maybe one of the bottommost steps, the outline of someone standing there. I don't know if they were looking up or not. When I realized what I was looking at, I slammed the door shut and sprinted out to my car. I sat in my car as I once again called 911. After police showed up a second time, they entered while I waited in one of their cars. They brought him out of the house in handcuffs a few minutes later. He was barefoot and wearing dark clothes that looked like they had been slept in. He didn't look at me once. I just don't think that he noticed me in the back of the car. They put him in the back of the other car and shut the door. I stayed outside while more officers went back in, and I refused to look at the guy in the back of the car. I was actually shaking. Even as I talked to the officers, I was stuttering in shock. It took longer than I expected for them to finish the rest of their search. When one of the officers finally came out, He asked how long I had lived there. I told him a few years. He nodded and wrote something down. He asked what time I usually went to the gym and which nights. I told him. He looked back at the house and told me they found food wrappers and bottled water behind the furnace in the basement, along with a phone charger plugged into an outlet down there. He said it looked like someone had been sleeping on the concrete using old insulation as padding. The man hadn't spoken a word to the officers. The main officer I was talking to told me the likely charges the man would be facing, but that ultimately it would be up to the district attorney. Eventually, they told me I could go back inside. It was days later that I was going through my camera roll to send my friend something, and I found a very, very disturbing picture. At first, I had to process how a picture like this could be taken. It was a picture of me, in my bed, sleeping, taken at 3:11 a.m. It was the same night that I woke up in the morning to my phone being unplugged from the wall outlet. The nightmare became real all over again. I contacted the unit listed on the incident report, and they asked me to come in to digitally transfer the photo for supplemental evidence. I was told that with this photo, he'd likely be facing additional charges such as stalking or even being registered as a sex offender for life. All good things to hear. It doesn't save me, however, from the trauma I'll forever have to live with thinking back to this shit. I'll never be able to go down into a basement alone at night again in my life. And I hoped I wasn't grabbed. When I started going up the stairs, I didn't run or anything. I took it slow and normal to not draw suspicion. But when I was about halfway up, I took a curious glance down the stairs, and that black mass was now at the bottom of the stairs, and I can confirm it was a person. I almost tripped as I started to run up the rest of the stairs and slam the basement door shut. I then started running up the stairs to the upper level of the house to Cody's room, where I shook him awake and yelled at him that there's someone in the basement and that he needs to wake up his dad. And during that commotion, I heard a slam from downstairs, and I yelled, "See?" Cody got up, and we went to his parents' room where we woke up his dad, and I told him there's someone in the basement. He got right out of bed without asking questions and ran down both flights of stairs to the basement, noting that the basement door was wide open. And when I mentioned I shut the basement door, Cody's dad yelled at Cody to call the cops, and he did. We also noticed the back door to the house was now open. So when the three of us were done looking through the basement, we all went to the backyard to search, then the front yard, and then the neighboring yards, all while Cody was still describing what was going on to the 911 operator. I'd say we were searching for 15 minutes before the police finally arrived, and then they did their full search and formally wrote up a report for the incident. By the end of it, there were some neighbors waking up and coming outside asking if everything was okay. By that point, I was sobered up, terrified, and wanted to go home. So as soon as the cops left, I went inside to talk with them for a bit, then I said goodbye and called an Uber home, refusing Cody's offer to drive me home. I worried for them a bit that night, but I was not sleeping in that basement after that. In fact, I never did again. We'd still have pre-games and stuff there, but the feeling in that basement changed for a while after that night, where I'd always glance at that corner of the basement and just think back to that night. That black mass. Clearing their throat downstairs. That's when everything instantly became 10 times more real. I could no longer lean on the glitching phone theory, even though deep down I already knew that was BS anyway. I went to my room and quietly closed and locked the door. What if my dad was testing me, seeing how I'd react in a home intrusion situation, or maybe my Uncle T? So I called my dad, but he didn't pick up. He may have already been asleep. It was like 11:30, so I called again and again, but no luck. I tried my luck with Uncle T, and he picked up on the second ring. I could tell he was in bed. He asked why I was calling, and I prefaced the phone call telling him this might sound crazy, and then dropped the bomb and asked if he was downstairs. I remember vividly his exact response and tone as he said, "Steve, what the hell are you talking about?" When I elaborated, he told me that's definitely something his brother would do. His brother, aka my dad. While we were on the phone, my phone started vibrating, I looked at the screen, and it was the no caller ID on the screen again. I begged my Uncle T to stay on the line real quick. I was putting him on hold as I picked up. He said okay, so I picked up the other call. As I said hello, there was the same silence. This time, I didn't hear the TV sounds on the other end. What did that mean? It seemed they had the phone on speaker because I could hear their footsteps. They were moving, and the footsteps were matching the footsteps I suddenly started hearing outside of my bedroom. I prayed with all my heart this was my dad messing with me. Then, my doorknob jiggled, and whoever was on the other side tried pushing the door. Thank God it was an old, heavy door with an old, heavy lock. The sound still synced with what I was hearing on the phone. Whoever was on the other side of the door knocked. I had the sudden thought to merge the two calls, and when I did, I yelled into the phone for my Uncle T, saying, "It's not my dad, get here now." I also yelled that whoever was in the house was also on the phone with us. My uncle seemed to wake up from this, and he started yelling into the phone things like, "I'm coming, you cocksucker." The no caller ID caller hung up the phone, and I heard footsteps move away from the door. This all but confirmed it was in fact not my dad. My uncle told me to stay in the bedroom. He was on his way. I wasn't a little kid, but I wasn't some big brolic man either. I was some skinny 19-year-old. My uncle knew I was in danger. He started heading over to the house. We lived in the same town at the time, but that 7 minutes he took to get to the house was the longest 5 years I'd ever experienced. I heard the familiar voice of my uncle screaming downstairs finally, so I rushed out of the room and downstairs. Having him there made everything feel better. We called the cops together while My name is Roger, and this happened to me on Halloween night 3 years ago. I'm 29 and work a boring office job, but it's good pay. When this happened, I was getting stuck with the stuff. Beginner's time off, the shifts nobody wanted, etc. So when Halloween, my favorite holiday, rolled around, I was actually quite excited. It was never easy being the new guy at work, so I was wanting to enjoy a night of seeing kids be kids and chilling out at home watching movies. At the time, I was living alone in a small house on the outskirts of town with my girlfriend, but she was out of town with her parents. It wasn't isolated exactly. I had neighbors, but the street got really quiet once the trick-or-treating hours ended. The families in the area usually shut their lights off around 9 p.m. Since I didn't have kids, I just handed out candy until the crowd died down. On several past Halloweens, before I got my own place, I was quite used to the occasional ding-dong ditch prank. That's why there is a trick and treat here and there. That year, Halloween fell on a Saturday, and I remember it was chilly but clear out. By 10:30, I was lounging on my couch, half watching a horror movie while picking through a bowl of leftover candy. I hadn't seen anyone in about an hour, so when I heard a faint knock at my side door, I assumed it was stragglers. But when I opened the door, no one was there. Just the empty driveway and the faint rustling of leaves. I brushed it off. Kids play pranks all the time on Halloween. I headed back to my living room to finish watching The Conjuring 2. 15 minutes later, I heard the same sound again, only this time it was coming from the back door, the one that led to the small deck. That set off alarms in my head because nobody used that entrance. I froze in the living room, listening. The TV was off now, and I could hear it clearly. The metal rattle of the back doorknob being tested, slowly and cautiously. Whoever was trying my door was either checking if it was locked cautiously or believed it was unlocked and trying to be quiet.